The night had a way of swallowing sound in Silver Creek Forest. Snow drifted through the pines, heavy and silent, muffling everything beneath its weight. Out there, under the pale wash of moonlight, Amelia Grant moved with the steady rhythm of someone who'd walked through darker nights before. 36 years old, former Army, she carried her scars the way she carried her breath, quietly, with purpose. Beside her padded shadow, a German shepherd whose amber eyes never stopped scanning the dark. He wasn't just a dog. He was her second set of instincts, sharper and quicker than her own. Amelia had learned long ago that the forest always told you something, if you paid attention. Tonight, it whispered unease. Shadow stiffened, his ears cutting forward like twin blades. Then came the low growl, a warning from deep in his chest. Before Amelia could speak, the dog broke into frantic digging, tearing at the frozen ground with a desperation she had never seen in him. Snow and ice flew, paws striking dirt like a shovel. Amelia crashed beside him, her gloved hands brushing back the frost. That's when she saw it. Fingers, human fingers, blue with cold, clawing weakly through the soil. Her breath caught. Jesus! She yanked her flashlight from her pack and aimed at the beam. The light revealed half a face, barely above the surface, lips cracked and trembling, eyes fluttering, too weak to focus. A man, buried alive. Amelia's training took over. She threw off her gloves and dug with both hands, pushing snow and dirt aside until her nails torn, her arms burned. Shadow barked in wind, matching her urgency. "Stay with me," she muttered, voice low but firm. "You're not dying out here." Finally, she cleared enough to drag him free. He was bound with rope at the chest, wrists raw where he had struggled against the ties. His breath rattled, shallow and thin, the kind of sound Amelia knew from the battlefield, the edge of life, the edge of gone. She pulled a knife from her belt and cut him loose, then stripped off her own jacket to wrap around his shaking frame. His skin was ice. His voice, when it came, was broken and thin. "Name's Daniel Cross." The words barely made it past his lips before his head fell against her shoulder. Amelia steadied him, eyes searching the darkness around them. Whoever had done this might still be close. Whoever wanted this man dead had nearly succeeded. The soldier in her felt the familiar tension coil in her chest. This wasn't random, this wasn't chance. And though she didn't know it yet, this frozen night in Silver Creek was only the beginning. Because Daniel Cross wasn't just a victim, he was a spark, and the fire he carried was about to burn straight into Amelia's life. The cabin was old, tucked deep into the timberline, where hunters and rangers rarely passed. It wasn't much for walls, a wood stove, and the kind of silence that pressed against you when the fire burned low. But for Amelia Grant, it had always been enough. That night, it became a lifeline. Daniel Cross lay stretched across her worn-out cat, wrapped in every blanket she could find. His breathing was shallow but steadier now, the bluish tint fading from his skin. Shadow curled up close, as if his warmth might keep the man tethered to this world. Amelia moved with the calm of habit, boiling water, pressing rags against frost-bitten hands, checking the rope burns on his wrists. She didn't speak much. Years in uniform had taught her that sometimes silence was the only medicine a broken body could take, but the silence had a way of turning on her. Her eyes drifted to the small frame on the shelf above the stove. Ethan, a black and white photo of him smiling, caught on some long-forgotten summer day. Her husband, gone 3 years, but the wound had never healed. The official story was vague, even neat on paper: an accident while assisting a federal investigation. No suspects, no clear answers. Amelia had asked questions, pushed for details. The response had been stone walls and closed doors, and yet here she was, staring at a man who had been left for dead in the same cold woods, bound with the same cruel precision Ethan had described in his final weeks. Coincidence didn't exist in Amelia's world, not anymore. She sat down at the edge of the cot, her voice low, almost to herself. "You knew something, didn't you?" Daniel stirred faintly, his lips moving without sound. He was still far from consciousness, but his face twitched at her words, as if the truth lived somewhere just beneath his frozen skin. Amelia rubbed her temples. The ghosts of Ethan's final days crept back. Late-night phone calls he wouldn't explain. The tension in his shoulders when he thought she wasn't watching. The fear he had tried so hard to bury beneath a smile. The army had trained her to fight enemies she could see, but Ethan had walked into a shadow war of politics, money, power, and paid the price. Now, looking at Daniel's, Amelia felt the same current pulling at her again. Something bigger than her, bigger than this forest, who had just crossed her path, and she knew what it meant. This wasn't just about saving a man from the snow. It was about following the trail Ethan had died for. She reached over, tightening the blanket around Daniel, her tone firm like a promise. You're not leaving me with half-truths, not this time. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, Amelia Grant stared at the photo of her husband, then at the broken man on her cot, for the first time in years. The ghosts didn't just haunt her, they pointed the way forward. Morning crept slowly into Silver Creek, pale sunlight slipping between the pines and cutting through the frost on Amelia's windows. Daniel was still out cold, breathing easier but locked somewhere between sleep and survival. Shadows stayed close to him, watchful, almost protective. Amelia sat at the table, nursing coffee gone lukewarm. Her eyes kept drifting to Ethan's photo again, that same familiar ache pressing in on her ribs. She'd been awake all night, replaying his last days in her head, searching for patterns she couldn't see. The knock on her door was sharp, not the kind of knock you got from a neighbor, the kind you got from law enforcement. Amelia slid her hand toward the pistol on the counter, just in case, then opened the door. Standing there was a woman in her late 30s, hair pulled back tight, eyes that had seen too much. She flashed a badge with one hand, but her other stayed free, close to her sidearm. Special Agent Sofia Ramirez, FBI. Amelia didn't move aside right away. You traveled a long way to find me. Sophia's eyes flicked past Amelia, straight to Daniel lying unconscious on the cot. The tension in her jaw eased just slightly. Good. He's alive. Amelia's grip on the doorframe tightened. You know him, Daniel Cross, Sophia said quietly, stepping inside. We served together in the NYPD before I joined the bureau. He's stubborn, reckless, but one of the best cops I ever knew. If someone buried him out there, it means he was close to something. She turned to Amelia, her expression heavy with the weight of things she couldn't yet say. And I think you already know who's behind it. The name landed between them like a stone. Victor Holloway, a billionaire, philanthropist, at least on the glossy magazine covers, but behind the curtain whispers of blackmail, missing whistleblowers, deals that smelled of blood. Amelia swallowed hard. My husband Ethan, he worked a federal case 3 years ago. No answers. Just a closed file and a body bag. Are you telling me Holloway was involved? Sophia didn't look away. I can't prove it yet, not in court, but Daniel was digging. He must have found something Holloway couldn't afford to let out. Amelia's pulse quickened. For years she had lived with a hat, the sense that Ethan's death had been no accident, and now, in the span of one night, the trail was alive again. Sophia lowered her voice, firm but carrying the weight of a promise. I swear to you, Amelia, if Holloway had anything to do with Ethan's death, I'll bring it into the light. But I need your help. You're the only one Daniel trusted enough to run to. That makes you part of this now. Amelia glanced at Daniel, then at Shadow, then back at Sophia. She felt the ghosts pressing closer, and for the first time, she realized that she wasn't facing them alone. By late afternoon, the storm clouds had rolled back, leaving the forest brittle and cold. Inside the cabin, the air was heavy with decisions. Amelia stood at the table while Sophia laid out files and photos like pieces of a puzzle no one wanted to see. Every photo carried Victor Holloway's smile, the polished billionaire grin, all charm and benevolence, ribbon cuttings, charity gut, political handshakes. To the public, he was a savior. But between the glossy prints, Sophia slid forward a different image, a ledger page, coded transactions, and a list of names. Some were marked with red slashes, people who had disappeared. Amelia felt her stomach tighten. She didn't need Sophia to explain. She had seen that kind of list before. In war zones, they called it targets. Sophia leaned closer. Victor thinks he's untouchable. We need him to prove otherwise. The Bureau can't just walk in without hard evidence. We need his words, his face, his confession tied to something that sticks. Daniel, still pale but awake now, shifted on the cot. His voice was rough, but steady enough to cut through the silence. Holloway's pride is his weakness. He likes to brag when he feels safe. Put him in a room full of his allies, give him the illusion of control, and he'll talk. He won't be able to help himself. Sophia nodded. There's a gala next week at the Crystal Dominion Hotel. It's his playground. Wealth, cameras, politicians. If we get you inside, Amelia, you can draw him out, get him talking. We'll have surveillance in place to record everything. Amelia crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. You want me to play bait? Sophia didn't flinch. I want you to play his equal. You're strong, disciplined, and you've already lost more to him than most. That gives you an edge he won't see coming. The room fell quiet. The idea hung between them, sharp as a blade. Shadow broke the silence first, letting out a low bark as if to remind them he was listening. Amelia reached down, resting a hand on his head. The warmth of his fur steadied her. If I do this, she said finally, Shadow comes with me. He's not just a dog. He's my backup, my warning system. If something goes sideways, he's the one who'll see it first." Sophia allowed herself a small smile. "Then we make him part of the plan." Daniel coughed, his expression grim. "This isn't a clean job, Amelia. Once you step into Halloween's world, you don't come out untouched." Amelia met his eyes. For years she'd carried Ethan's ghost in silence, waiting for a chance that never came. Now the chance was here. Dangerous and messy, but real. She drew a long breath. Then it settled. "We go into his world, and this time we don't leave with hark-truths." The fire popped in the stove. Outside, night fell over Silver Creek. The trap was set. The Crystal Dominion Hotel didn't just host events. It staged them, a palace of glass and marble, rising out of the city skyline like a monument to money itself. On nights like this, its chandeliers burned brighter than the street lamps outside, and the red carpet gleamed under camera flashes. Inside, the charity gala unfolded in a wash of champagne and silk gowns. Waiters in white gloves floated through the crowd. Silver trays balanced high. A string quartet played in the corner, soft enough to be ignored, but loud enough to remind everyone this was elegance, not business. Amelia Grant stepped into the ballroom, every detail of her appearance crafted to blend in. The dress had been borrowed, the jewelry fake but convincing. Her posture, though that was real, straight back, carrying the quiet discipline of someone who had seen battlefields that made this glittering room feel like a stage play. Shadow walked close at her side, wearing a discreet harness and service dog tag. To most of the guests, he was invisible, just another trained companion for a woman with connections. To Amelia, he was her radar, her early warning system. His ears twitched constantly, reading the room in ways no human could. Across the street, 2 blocks away, Sofia Ramirez monitored from a surveillance van disguised as catering staff delivery. Banks of screens glowed inside, cameras hidden in the ballroom feeding live footage. Daniel sat beside her, pale but alert, wired into the comms. His eyes stayed fixed on Amelia's feed. "We're walking into a shark tank," Daniel muttered, adjusting his headset. "Stay loose, but don't let your guard drop. He'll spot nerves before he spots courage." Amelia touched the small earpiece hidden beneath her hair. "Copy that." The crowd shifted as a figure entered through the grand staircase. Victor Holloway, tall, silver-haired, tailored in a way that made every movement look intentional. His smile cut across the room like a blade hidden in velvet. People leaned toward him instinctively, drawn by the gravity of his power. Amelia watched him from the edge of the crowd. Her heart thudded once, hard, but her face didn't show it. Shadow gave a faint growl, so quiet only she could hear. She placed a steadying hand on his neck. In the van, Sophia's voice came through the calms, low and steady. "Target acquired. Amelia, when you're ready, move into position. Stay within 5 feet for optimal audio pickup." Amelia exhaled slowly. To anyone watching, she was just another guest circling toward the man of the hour. But inside, every step felt like threading a needle between life and death. Ethan's ghost followed her into that ballroom. Every laugh around her sounded false. Every clink of glass a warning. She reminded herself why she was here. Not for the glitter, not for the cameras, but for the truth. And tonight, inside the Crystal Dominion, the truth was going to show its face. Victor Holloway moved through the ballroom like he owned not just the hotel but the city itself. People leaned in as he passed, desperate for a smile, a handshake, a scrap of acknowledgement. He gave it all freely, though every gesture felt calculated like chips tossed to gamblers at a table he already controlled. Amelia Grant waited near the champagne bar, her pulse steady, her expression neutral. Shadow sat at his side, watching the crowd with restless focus. To most, he was just a dog lying down, but Amelia could feel the tension running through him like a live wire. His nose twitched, picking up scents she couldn't name, and his ears shifted with every faint sound buried beneath the music. Victor finally approached, drawn by the magnetism of curiosity. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice smooth, refined, touched with the kind of charm that made strangers want to trust him. Amelia turned, her smile practiced. "Amelia Grant, a friend of the Foundation. I've heard a great deal about you." His eyes studied her, not with warmth, but with precision. A chess player sizing up an unexpected opponent. "And yet, here you are, speaking to me as if we were old acquaintances." She let the moment breathe before replying. "Sometimes it feels that way. You see, my late husband once spoke your name. Ethan Grant. He worked on a case years ago, never could quite let it go." The air tightened. Victor smiled and faltered, but the pause was there, subtle, dangerous. From the van, Daniel's voice crackled softly in Amelia's ear. "Careful, you just stepped onto the board." Victor chuckled, as though brushing off a ghost. Ethan Grant, yes. I remember the name. A man who chased shadows until shadows swallowed him. Such a shame. Amelia's stomach nodded, but she didn't let it reach her face. Yes, a shame. She tilted her glass, watching the golden liquid ripple. Some shadows don't fade, though. They linger, for a flicker of a second. His gaze hardened, then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. Be careful where you walk, Miss Grant. Some shadows bite. Before she could answer, Shadow's low growl vibrated at her side. His body tensed, head turned toward a cluster of waitstaff near the far entrance. His hackles lifted. Amelia rested a steadying hand on his harness, but her eyes followed his focus. Daniel caught it too, watching through the hidden cameras. Something's wrong. I see 2 servers who weren't on the entry list. Positions, 6 o'clock. Near the doors. Victor straightened, his smile returning like a mask sliding back into place. Enjoy the evening, Miss Grant. I have guests to attend. He drifted away into the crowd, leaving the warning behind like a dagger in her ribs. Amelia's pulse finally jumped. Shadow tugged lightly against the harness, urging her attention back to the threat. She scanned the room, knowing the game had shifted. This wasn't just a gala anymore. It was a battlefield in disguise. The night pressed on inside the Crystal Dominion ballroom, laughter echoing off crystal chandelier. The smell of money and perfume thick in the air. Amelia kept her place among the crowd, moving from circle to circle like she belonged there, but every step, every word, was calculated. Victor Halloway had grown louder as the evening wore on. His glass was never empty, and the charm that once felt deliberate now bled into arrogance. Champagne loosened his tongue, and those who hovered nearby leaned closer, eager to catch whatever the billionaire chose to spill. Shadow sat beneath Amelia's table, eyes locked on Victor, ears twitching with every change in tone. The dog's steady presence grounded her, even as her own nerves pricked with anticipation. Daniel's voice came through her earpiece, steady and low. You're doing fine. Just keep him talking. We only need him to slip once. Sophia added from the van. The record is clean. Every word is being captured. Amelia approached the bar where Victor held court, his jacket slightly undone, his tie loosened. He gestured broadly, as if the entire room existed for his amusement. She eased closer, offering a small smile that invited him to keep speaking. Power, Victor declared, his words slurring around the edges, isn't something you inherit. It's something you take, and once you have it, you keep it by any means necessary. The group around him laughed nervously, unsure whether to nod or excuse themselves. Amelia tilted her head, careful not to press too hard. That sounds like a lonely game. Victor looked at her then, eyes sharp despite the drink. Lonely? No. Dangerous? Yes, because they're always pests. People who believe they can stand against you. They never last. He paused, smirking into his glass. Ask Ethan Grant. The words landed like a strike to her chest. Amelia felt the floor tilt beneath her, but she held her expression steady, even as her heartbeat thundered. In her ear, Daniel's voice tightened. We got it. Stay calm, Amelia. Do not react. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice, his breath heavy with liquor. Men like Ethan thought the law would protect them, but the law bends. Ms. Grant always bends. And those who don't, they break. The nearby guests shifted uncomfortably. Some excused themselves, sensing danger in his tone, but Amelia stayed, nodding lightly, as if she were just another admirer to enthrall, to challenge him. Sophia's whisper came urgent through the line. This is it. He's handing us the rope. Keep him talking. But Victor caught himself. His gaze flicked across the room, perhaps noticing the sudden silence of those nearby. He straightened, laughter covering the slip. Enough of business talk. This is a party. Drink, my friends. Drink. The crowd exhaled, relieved. Music swelled again, pulling the attention elsewhere. Amelia stepped back, her hand brushing Shadow's fur beneath the table. She felt his warmth, his steadiness, and drew in a slow breath. Victor had given them more than he realized, and yet it was only half a confession, enough to open the door, but not enough to close the case. The game wasn't over, it was just beginning. The music soared, violins cutting through the air, glasses clinking under the chandeliers. The gala seemed to recover its rhythm after Victor's drunken outburst, but Amelia felt the tremor beneath the surface. The Shadow hadn't stopped scanning the room, muscles coiled, nose twitching like he'd caught a scent no one else could. Then it happened. A man in a waiter's jacket stepped out from the far side of the ballroom, his tray tilted, glasses spilling with a crash. Guests gasped, annoyed, but Amelia's eyes locked on the small movement beneath the tray, metal glinting. A pistol-drawn low gun, Daniel's voice barked in her ear. The assassin raised the weapon, barrel cutting a straight line toward Amelia's chest. For a split second, time flowed, her mind flashing to Ethan. 2 promises left unfinished. Shadow exploded into motion. His snarl ripped through the music, his body launching forward like a storm unleashed. He collided with the gunman before the first shot rang out. The pistol fired, the sound deafening in the marble hall, but the bullet went wide, shattering a crystal centerpiece instead of Amelia's heart. Guests screamed, scattering in every direction. Move, move. Sophia's voice cracked like a whip. From every hidden corner, FBI agents surged, weapons raised. The assassin hit the floor under Shadow's weight, teeth snapping inches from his throat. He fought back, trying to aim the gun again, but Amelia was already there, kicking the weapon from his grip. Chaos filled the ballroom, tables overturned, chandeliers swaying as bodies shoved for the exits. Victor Holloway stood at the center of it all, watching with a face carved in stone, for a heartbeat. Amelia swore she saw amusement in his eyes, as if he'd planned the whole thing. Secured the shooter, Sophia ordered, her team swarming the downed man. Handcuffs clicked, radios buzzed, and Shadow growled until Amelia's firm hand pulled him back. But Victor was gone. Daniel's strained voice cut in over the coms. He's moving. North exit. Service hallway. We're losing him. Amelia spun, searching the ballroom's edge. But all she saw were fleeing guests and the wreckage of luxury. The billionaire had slipped away in the panic. Vanishing like smoke into the night, Sophia pushed through the agents, her jaw set. Damn it, we've got the hitman, but Holloway's the one we needed. She glanced at Amelia, her eyes sharp. He knows now. This was a message. Amelia's pulse slowed, though her hand still shook from the near miss. Shadow pressed against her leg, steady as stone. She stroked his fur, grounding herself in his calm. He tried to kill me, Amelia said quietly. No, Sophia replied, scanning the shattered ballroom. He tried to warn you, and now he's running. The gala was over. The mask had slipped. Victor Holloway had declared war. By dawn, the Crystal Dominion Hotel looked less like the jewel of the city and more like a crime scene. Police cruisers lined the street, reporters fought for position, and shattered glass sparkled on the pavement like frost. The news spread faster than the bullet had the night before. Every channel ran the footage, shaky cell phone videos of panicked guests screaming, of a German shepherd tackling a gunman, of FBI agents swarming the ballroom. But what drew the most attention was Victor Holloway. Clips showed him slipping away through the chaos, his face caught in fractured frames, first calm, then sharp, then gone. It didn't take long for anchors and pundits to connect the dots. Questions are mounting this morning, one reporter declared, her voice cutting across the morning broadcast, about Victor Holloway's connection to last night's assassination attempt. Eyewitnesses confirmed the billionaire was present during the attack, but vanished before law enforcement could secure the scene. Amelia watched from Sophia's safe house, shadows stretched at her feet, his breathing steady in contrast to the noise blaring from the TV. She sipped coffee gone cold, her jaw tight. On screen, images of Victor filled the feed, smiling with politicians, cutting ribbons at hospitals, donating checks larger than most families' mortgages. Then came the new eclipse, grainy and harsh, his drunken rant, words about pests and power captured on hidden audio, already leaked to the press. Daniel sat nearby, bandaged from the scuffle but alert. He's bleeding credibility, he muttered. For a man like Victor, that's worse than prison. The empire doesn't run on money alone, it runs on reputation. Sophia stood with arms crossed, her phone buzzing every few minutes with updates from Washington. Don't underestimate him. A wounded predator is still a predator, and if he feels cornered, he'll lash out harder. Amelia's eyes stayed on the screen. They were playing clips of Ethan, now archived interviews from when he was alive, photographs of him smiling, standing tall in uniform. The connection wasn't explicit, but the media was hungry, digging. Victor's shadow over Ethan's death would surface too. Her stomach twisted. The world was finally seeing Victor for what he was. But it came with a fresh wave of pain, tearing open wounds she'd tried to stitch closed. Shadow lifted his head, sensing her unease. Pressing against her knee, Amelia stroked his ear, drawing steadiness from his quiet loyalty. Sophia's phone rang again. She answered, listening with sharp focus. When she hung up, her expression was grim. He's gone north. Private chopper lifted off before sunrise, destination Bertwith Range. He's pulling back to his fortress. Daniel leaned forward, wincing from the effort. That's where he'll make his stand. Amelia looked away from the screen, from the collapsing image of Victor Holloway, the philanthropist, and toward the storm brewing on the horizon. His mask was gone. His empire was cracking. but a cornered man with everything to lose was about to be more dangerous than ever. The Bertooth Range stretched north like a wall of jagged teeth, its peaks already buried under fresh snow. Somewhere up there, perched on Raven Peak, sat Victor Holloway's stronghold, a glass and stone fortress designed as both vacation retreat and impenetrable castle. By noon, news helicopters were circling the city, but Victor was long gone. His private helicopter had cut across the dawn sky hours earlier, vanishing into the mountains. Now, the world only had grainy footage and unanswered questions. At the FBI's temporary command post, the tension was thick. Maps of the range were spread across folding tables, satellite feeds flickering on screens. Agents moved like soldiers before a storm, arming themselves with snow gear, radios, and weapons. Sofia Ramirez stood at the center, giving orders with clipped precision. Raven Peak is surrounded by avalanche terrain. No direct vehicle access once the storm front moves in. We'll insert at the base, climb halfway then switch to skis and snowmobiles. Air support is on standby, but visibility will be touch and go. Daniel cross-leaned against the table, his side still bandaged. He looked pale but unshaken. Victor's going to dig in. The estate isn't just a house, it's a bunker. High walls, private guards, surveillance woven into the rock. He won't run anymore. Not up there. Amelia stood near the window, shadow at her side. The German shepherd's eyes followed every movement, ears flicking at the hum of equipment. Amelia's breath fogged the cold glass as she looked out toward the mountains. She'd been a soldier long enough to know what was coming. This wasn't a chase anymore. It was a siege. Sofia stepped closer, lowering her voice. I need you steady, Amelia. Victor tried to put you in the ground once. He won't hesitate to try again. If you walk into Raven Peak, there's no turning back. Amelia turned, her jaw set. He killed Ethan. He buried Daniel alive. He's tried to silence anyone who stood in his way. If this ends tonight, then I'm going to be there. Shadow pressed against her leg as if in agreement. A silent oath carried into his stance. Across the room, the weather report came in, grinned. Storm system moving in by evening. High winds, whiteout conditions likely. Sofia didn't flinch. Then we move before it hits. Load up. The agents filed out, their boots pounding against the floor, the hum of engines already starting outside. Amelia followed, her pulse steady, Shadow trotting beside her. The cold air hit her face as the door swung open, the snow-packed wind biting like teeth. High above, Raven Peak waited, its glass windows reflecting the last light of day, its walls daring anyone to try. Victor Holloway had fled to the mountain, and the mountain was where his empire would fall. The storm rolled down from the peaks like a living thing, swallowing the world in white. Snow blasted across the windshields of the FBI's engines, grinding as the machines crawled up the frozen trail. Visibility dropped to a few feet. Headlights only lit a swirling wall of ice. Inside the lead vehicle, Sofia Ramirez gripped the radio, her voice firm but tight. Keep formation. We're close to the ridge. Raven Peak is less than 2 miles. The words had barely left her mouth when the engine roared high, then died with a metallic cough. The snowcat lurched, shuddered, and sank into a drift. Behind them, another vehicle stalled. The line broke apart, swallowed by the storm. Damn it. Daniel slammed his hand against the dash. The intakes are freezing. Sofia tried the radio again. Static. The storm was too heavy. No signal would carry. For a moment, silence pressed in, only the scream of the wind and the rattle of sleet against metal. Mealy sand found Shadows harnessed. The German shepherd was on his feet, nose pressed to the door, body straining forward. His instincts cut through the chaos with clarity. He knew the way. Amelia opened the side hatch, snow blasting inside. We go on foot. Sofia hesitated, scanning the whiteout. We'll never see the trail. We don't have to, Amelia said, tightening her coat and pulling her hood low. She gave Shadow a quick nod. He does. The dog leaped into the snow without hesitation, his body cutting a path through drifts that reached to Amelia's knees. His dog's shape was a beacon against the storm, moving with certainty where humans could only guess. The agents followed, rifles slung tight, heads bent against the wind. The snow swallowed sound and light alike, every step an act of will. Shadow forged ahead, pausing only to glance back, ears flicking as if urging them on. Daniel stumbled once, catching himself against a tree trunk half buried in ice. He's leading us through the timberline. His voice was raw, part AW, part disbelief. Sofia forced her way forward. Stay tight. Nobody falls behind. If Shadow can cut a path, we keep moving. Amelia's legs burned, her face stung from the ice, but her focus stayed locked on the dark outline ahead. Shadow never faltered. His paws sank deep, snow clinging to his fur, but he pressed on, guiding them through the maze of trees. Minutes bled into an hour. The snowcats were long gone, buried in white silence. The only thing keeping them alive was the dog pulling them forward, step by step, toward Raven Peak. Finally, through the blizzard, Amelia caught the faintest glow of light. Far ahead, through the veil of snow, the outline of steel gates shimmered against the storm. Shadow stopped, ears pricked, his body tense. He'd led them to the edge of Victor's fortress. The mountain had tried to bury them, but the storm had not won. The glow of Raven Peak's gates flickered faintly through the storm, a promise of shelter or a warning. Shadow halted first, his body rigid, nose lifted against the wind. His growl vibrated low in his chest, nearly drowned by the howl of the blizzard. Amelia tightened her grip on his harness. Something's out there. The answer came a heartbeat later. A muzzle flash cracked through the snow, followed by the whip of a bullet tearing bark off a frozen tree inches from Daniel's head. "Contact!" Sophia shouted, dropping to her knee and returning fire. The storm erupted with chaos. Shapes emerged from the white men in black winter gear, rifles raised, moving like shadows with discipline. Victor's mercenaries, they had been waiting. The firefight lit the night in stuttering bursts. Gunfire echoed off the cliffs, muffled but deadly. Snow exploded in plumes where rounds struck. Amelia dragged Daniel down behind a rock outcrop as Shadow lunged forward, teeth bared, snarling against the unseen enemy. "Stay with me," she shouted. Daniel gritted his teeth, firing a few rounds before a shot slammed into his side. He gasped, dropping hard into the snow, crimson spreading fast across his parka. "Daniel." Amelia pressed her hand against the wound, her glove slick with blood. His face was pale, his breath ragged. "Don't you quit on me." Sophia's voice cut through the storm. "We're pinned, two flanking left." Her rifle barked, dropping one silhouette, but the others kept pressing forward. Shadow lunged into the fray, barreling through the snow toward a gunman who'd broken too close. The mercenary swung his weapon, but Shadow hit him full force, dragging him down in a violent tumble. The man's scream was swallowed by the blizzard. Amelia forced her focus back to Daniel. His eyes fluttered but stayed open, pain etched deep. "You get him to that gate," he rasped, "and you finish this. You're not dying out here," Amelia snapped, rage cutting through the fear. She tore a strip from her scarf, pressing it hard against the wound, willing it to hold. Bullets snapped overhead, shredding branches, carving sparks off stone. Sophia crawled closer, her face grim. "We can't stay pinned here. If we don't push through, we're all dead." Amelia looked past her through the white veil of snow to the faint outline of Victor's fortress. So close, just beyond reach. She met Sophia's eyes, her voice steady despite the storm. "Then we push, I'll cover. You drag him." Sophia nodded, already pulling Daniel up, his weight heavy against her shoulder. Amelia rose from cover, rifle tight to her chest. Shadow reappeared through the snow, muzzle bloody, standing guard at her side. The storm screamed louder, swallowing sight and sound. But Amelia didn't hesitate. She stepped into the open, firing into the white, each shot a demand, each step pulling them closer to the gates of Raven Peak. The ambush hadn't broken them. Not yet, but Victor's mountain was only beginning to bare its teeth. Snow whipped sideways in violent gusts, turning the battlefield into a blur of white and gunfire. Daniel lay against the rocks, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage. His breathing came in shallow bursts. Every instinct in Amelia screamed at her to stay by his side. But the mercenaries were closing in. "Stay with him," she barked at Sophia. "I'll hold the line." Sophia's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She crouched low, keeping Daniel's head steady, whispering words of grit and survival in his ear. Amelia rose into the storm, rifle braced, heart hammering. She moved like she had nothing left to lose because in that moment, she didn't. Each burst of fire was precise, controlled, forcing the mercenaries to dive for cover. She wasn't giving them an inch. From the corner of her eye, a dark shape tore through the snow. Shadow, the German shepherd, lunged at a gunman who'd slipped behind their flank. His teeth sank deep into the man's arm, dragging him down. The mercenary screamed, weapon clattering into the drifts, before Shadow yanked him hard into silence. "Good boy," Amelia shouted, her voice raw. "Hold the line." Two more mercenaries surged forward, rifles spitting fire. Bullets hissed past, one snapping a chunk from the rock by her head. Amelia dropped into a crouch, firing back. One man folded into the snow. The other staggered before Shadow pounced again, finishing what her bullets had started. Sophia's voice called out behind her, "He's fading. Amelia, we need to move now." "I know." Amelia's breath burned in her chest. She reloaded with numb fingers, forcing the magazine into place. She couldn't let Victor's men pin them here, not with Daniel bleeding out, not with a fortress so close. Another figure appeared through the storm, taller, steadier, better armed. This one wasn't rushing. He advanced with cold precision, firing in bursts that pinned Amelia to the rocks. A squad leader maybe, the kind of man Victor trusted with the final kill. Amelia leaned out, squeezing off rounds, but he was quick, ducking back, answering with heavy fire. Snow exploded around her, then shadow darted wide, circling low. The shepherd cut through the storm like instinct itself. The gunman shifted focus just a moment too late. Shadow leaped, slamming into him, knocking his rifle aside. Amelia didn't hesitate. She stepped out, pulled the trigger, and dropped him clean. Silenced fell in ragged patches, broken only by the wind and the ringing in her ears. The last of Victor's mercenaries scattered back into the white, their line broken. Amelia stood tall, chest heaving, rifle still hot in her hands. Shadow padded back to her side, muzzle stained with the proof of his loyalty. Behind her, Sophia called again. Urgent. He won't last much longer. Amelia turned, eyes locked on the fortress gates now looming through the blizzard. They were battered, bloodied, but alive. This is it, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The last line before we take him down, and with Shadow at her heel, she prepared to storm the mountain. Daniel's face was pale against the snow, his lips tinged blue. Each breath came like it cost him more than he could give. Amelia knelt beside him, hands pressing against the wound, but she could feel his strength slipping through her fingers. "Don't you dare quit on me," she whispered, her voice breaking against the howl of the storm. Daniel's eyes opened, heavy and glassy. Amelia, his voice was rough, but steady enough to cut through the chaos. "You have to finish this. Don't let Victor walk away again." She shook her head hard, fighting the lump in her throat. "We can get you inside, patch you up. Just hold on." "No," he coughed, blood flecking his lips. "If you drag me with you, none of us make it. You know I'm right." Sophia crouched close, eyes darting between them, her hand steady on Daniel's shoulder. "He's too weak, Amelia. I can get him back to the med team. You go. Take Shadow. End this." The wind screamed around them, pelting ice against her face. Amelia's mind raced, torn in two. She'd carried people out of fire before, carried soldiers bleeding in the sand. Walking away from Daniel now felt like betrayal. But the fortress loomed ahead through the blizzard, lights glowing faintly against the white. Victor Holloway was inside, shielded by walls, money, and power. If she didn't move now, he'd vanish again, just like he had after Ethan's death. Daniel gripped her wrist with surprising strength, his eyes locking onto hers. "Promise me. Don't let his blood be for nothing. Don't let Ethan's." The name cut deep, raw, and unhealed. She swallowed, her throat tight, and nodded once. "I promise." Daniel let out a shaky breath, as if the fight left him the second she agreed. Sophia moved fast, wrapping her scarf tighter around his chest, bracing herself to drag him back through the snow. Her voice was firm, resolute. "Go, Amelia. This is on you now." Amelia stood, rifle in hand, Shadow pressing against her leg, ears alert, eyes fixed on the looming fortress. The storm howled, but her world went silent, narrowed to one mission, one man, one ending. She glanced down at Daniel one last time. He gave her a faint smile, the kind a man wears when he knows his part is over. "Bring him down," he whispered. Amelia turned, shoulders squaring against the wind. "Come on, Shadow." The shepherd barked low, steady, as if he understood the weight of what lay ahead. Together they pushed forward into the storm toward Raven Peak's gates. Behind them, Sophia hurried Daniel back toward the faint hope of survival. Ahead, the fortress stood like a dark promise. Amelia didn't feel the cold anymore. She felt the fire, and nothing, not the storm, not the walls, not Victor himself, was going to stop her from keeping her promise. The gates of Raven Manor rose out of the snow like the jaws of some great beast, black iron wrapped in ice, wired with sensors that pulsed faint red against the storm. Beyond them, Victor Holloway's mansion glowed warm and golden, an island of luxury in the heart of a blizzard. Amelia pressed her back against the tree line, Shadow low at her side, ears pricked. Behind her, the crunch of boots grew louder. FBI units pushing through the snow, rifles ready. Sophia led the column, her face half covered by a balaclava, eyes hard. "Once we breach those gates, every system in that place will wake up," Sophia said over the coms. "Motion detectors, drones, automated defenses. He built this house like a fortress." Amelia scanned the walls, steel plating hidden beneath stone. cameras tucked into carved gargoyles, the faint hum of generators beneath the storm. She almost smiled. Victor wasn't just paranoid, he was prepared. The first team moved up with cutting torches. Sparks flared bright against the storm, hissing as they hit the snow. Shadow growled low, nose twitching. Amelia felt it to a pressure, like the air itself, waiting to snap. Then it came. The gates lit up with a high-pitched alarm, floodlights cutting through the snow. From hidden ports along the wall, small drones buzzed into the night. Their roadies slicing the blizzard. Red lasers painted the snow around the FBI line. Contact, Sophia barked. Gunfire cracked across the storm. Groans spat bursts of suppressed rounds, shredding branches and peppering the snow with sparks. Agents hit the ground, returning fire, flashes lighting up the whiteout. Amelia dropped flat, pulling Shadow with her. Her pulse hammered, but her hands were steady as she shouldered her rifle. She picked off the nearest drone with a single shot, its metal shell spinning down into the snow. But for every one that fell, 2 more rose from the storm. Sophia shouted into her radio diversion team. "Flank left, we need that main gate down before he locks the compound." Amelia looked at the glowing mansion, its windows shuddering like eyelids. Victor was inside, watching, maybe even smiling at their struggle. He'd spent years building this, a palace wrapped in paranoia. Not tonight. She scrambled to her feet, signaling Shadow forward. "I'll draw their fire," she shouted. Sophia caught her arm. "You'll get yourself killed." Amelia's jaw tightened. "I promised Daniel. I promised Ethan. He doesn't get to win again." Before Sophia could stop her, Amelia sprinted into the open, Shadow sprinting beside her. Drones whined, red lights snapping toward her like predators. Bullets hissed past, biting into the snow at her heels. She fired as she ran, dropping one drone, then another. Shadow leaped at a low-flying machine, jaws clamping down, sparks bursting as he ripped it from the sky. Behind her, the FBI seized the chance, pushing up with breaching gear, slamming charges against the gates. The storm roared, the gates shook, and Raven Manor prepared to show them just how much Victor Holloway had to lose. The steel gates gave way with a thunderous crack, fire and smoke spilling into the night. Agents surged forward, their boots pounding across the icy courtyard. Glass shattered as breaching teams stormed the lower levels, but Amelia didn't follow the pack. Shadow pulled ahead, leading her through the chaos. Through a side entryway blasted open by a charge, the air inside the manor was warm, almost suffocating after the storm, thick with the smell of cedar, marble, and old money. Her footsteps echoed as she moved deeper. Rifle up, breath sharp, chandeliers glittered overhead, absurd in their elegance. For a moment, she felt like she had stepped into another world, a golden cage built for a man who thought himself untouchable. Then the sound came, slow, deliberate applause. Amelia froze at the threshold of the grand hall. Victor Holloway stood at the far end, framed by twin staircases curling up like serpents. He wore a tailored suit, untouched by the storm, a crystal glass in his hand. His smile was thin, sharp, the kind that belonged to a predator who thought the trap was already sprung. "Well," Victor said, his voice carrying through the cabinet's hall, "the soldier arrives. All grit, no grace. I must admit, Amelia, you're harder to bury than your husband." The words hit like shrapnel, but she didn't flinch. She leveled her rifle, her voice steady. "You killed Ethan. You bled this country for your power. Tonight it ends," Victor chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in its glass ends. "No, no. Tonight, the world sees what it takes to be strong. Your husband thought justice was strength. He was wrong. Justice is for children. Power is the only truth." Amelia took a step closer, Shadow pacing low beside her. "Power without conscience is rot. You've built your empire on fear and blood, and all of it is coming down." Victor's eyes narrowed. For the first time, the mask slipped and she saw the man beneath the paranoia, the desperation, but his voice hardened. "Do you think dragging me into the light changes anything? Another man will take my place. Another hand will hold the knife. You're just one woman with a dog and a grudge." Her grip tightened on the rifle. "No, I'm a woman with a promise, and promises don't die." The hall trembled as gunfire rattled in the distance, FBI clashing with Victor's men in the upper levels. But here, in this chamber of marble and shadow, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Victor set down his glass and opened his arms, as though welcoming her into a duel. "Then show me, soldier, show me if your justice is stronger than my power." Amelia raised her weapon, her heart steady, Shadow growling low, and for the first time, Victor Holloway looked like a man who wasn't certain he'd win. The storm outside still rattled the windows, but inside Raven Manor, Silence stretched across the grand hall. Amelia kept her rifle leveled, her breath steady. Shadow circled low at her side, muscles coiled. Ready, Victor Holloway smirked, though a tremor edged his expression. You think you've cornered me. I own senators. I built this country's backbone while men like Ethan begged for scraps. And you, he sneered, glass shards of venom in his tone. You were never more than a soldier looking for someone to salute. Amelia's voice was cold steel. Ethan died because he uncovered your crimes, didn't he? For the first time, Victor faltered, his jaw flexed, eyes flicking toward the cameras mounted high on the walls, his own security system. Still humming red, Amelia caught it. Every word you say is being recorded, she said, letting the truth hang heavy. The world is watching. Victor, you can hide behind money, but not from your own mouth. He laughed, sharp and hollow, pacing across the marble like a lion behind glass. Recorded. Do you think the FBI's little toys can outlast me? Do you think anyone cares? His voice rose, echoing through the chamber. Rage boiled over, tearing away the careful mask. Yes, I silenced Ethan. He thought he could expose me, your righteous husband, waving his files, his pathetic truth, so I cut him out. I buried him like I'll bury you. The words cracked like a gunshot. For a heartbeat, even the storm seemed to go quiet. Amelia's chest tightened, grief colliding with fury, but she stood tall. You just confessed, Victor, to the murder of a federal investigator. To conspiracy. To blood. That's not power. That's desperation. From her earpiece, Sophia's voice broke through, sharp and steady. We've got it. Amelia, every word. Keep him talking, he's hanging himself. Victor's eyes darted, realization hitting too late. His empire, built on secrets, had just been gutted by his own arrogance. He slammed a fist against the railing of the staircase, knuckles splitting, voice ragged with fury. You think the truth matters. People don't want justice. They want protection. They want men like me to make the hard choices. And if a few die along the way, so be it. Amelia lowered her rifle just enough to let her words cut deeper. No, Victor. People don't need tyrants pretending to be guardians. They need to know that darkness can be beaten. Tonight, they'll see it. Shadow barked, sharp and commanding, the sound echoing through the hall like a verdict. The doors behind Amelia burst open, FBI agents pouring in, weapons raised. Sophia led the charge, her voice ringing, Victor Holloway, you're under arrest. Victor staggered back, his empire crumbling not with a bullet, but with the weight of truth spilling out of his own mouth. His face twisted, caught between rage and disbelief, and for the first time, Amelia saw him not as a giant, but as a man finally stripped bare. The grand hall shook with the sound of FBI boots pounding across the marble. Agents fanned out, rifles locked on Victor Holloway for a moment. The billionaire seemed frozen in the light of their flashlights, his empire shattered, his mask torn away. Sophia's voice cut sharp and clear. On your knees, Victor, hands where we can see them. But Victor wasn't finished. His eyes burned with something beyond fear, pure defiance, a man who would rather drag the world down than face judgment. Slowly, almost casually, his hand slipped beneath his jacket. Amelia's gut clenched. She shouted, weapon, just as the flash of steel glinted under the chandelier. Victor drew fast, fury propelling him where reason failed. The barrel swung toward Amelia, his voice breaking into a roar. You think you've beaten me. Time fractured into pieces. Amelia's rifle came up, but she was a breath too slow. Then Shadow moved. The German shepherd launched from her side like a bullet made of muscle and fury. His body hit Victor mid-lunge, teeth sinking into the man's arm. The gunshot cracked, deafening in the chamber. A bullet sparking off marble inches from Amelia's shoulder. Victor screamed, staggering backward, Shadow dragging him down. The shepherd's growl filled the hall, low and primal, a sound of loyalty turned into weapon. Hold your fire, Sophia barked, keeping her agents from shooting in the chaos. Amelia rushed forward, adrenaline surging. She kicked the weapon from Victor's grasp, the pistol skittering across the polished floor. Shadow held firm, pinning the billionaire with every ounce of his strength. Victor thrashed, his tailed suit torn, his face twisted in rage and disbelief. Get this mud off me, he spat, but the words carried no power anymore. Amelia knelt beside him, pressing her rifle barrel to the marble just inches from his head. Her voice was calm, steady, ironclad. It's over, Victor. You had your empire, your secrets, your lies. Now you've got nothing. Shadow released on command, stepping back but keeping his teeth bared, a silent promise he would strike again if needed. Victor gasped, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm where Shadow had torn into him. Around them, agents moved in, snapping handcuffs onto wrists that had once written checks large enough to buy senators. Sophia crouched beside Amelia, her eyes never leaving Victor. The world just saw you for what you are. No lawyers, no money, no walls are going to save you this time. Victor sagged against the marble, cuffed, defeated. The storm outside howled through the shattered windows, as if nature itself was closing the chapter. Amelia reached down, her hand brushing Shadow's fur, steadying her own heartbeat. He looked up at her, eyes sharp, waiting. She whispered almost to herself, "Good boy." For the second time that night, Shadow had been the line between her life and death, and for the first time since Ethan's murder, Amelia felt the weight of power shift not in Victor's favor, but in hers. Victor Holloway's wrists clicked into steel, the sound echoing louder than any gabble. The billionaire who had bought politicians, silenced enemies, and lived above consequence now knelt on the marble floor of his own fortress, coughed like a common criminal. Sophia gave the order with no hesitation, "Get him out of my sight." 2 agents hauled Victor to his feet. He struggled, but the fight was gone. Blood stained the sleeve of his silk suit where Shadow's teeth had torn through, his face pale with the rage of a man who'd finally run out of cards to play. Amelia stood back, rifle lowered, watching the empire collapse in front of her eyes. Shadow sat at her heel, still alert, as though daring Victor to try again. Through the shattered windows, flashing blue and red lights cut across the snow. FBI convoys rolled in, headlights slicing the storm. Camera crews had already gathered outside the gates, their lenses hungry for the story unfolding inside. By the time Victor was shoved into the back of an armored van, microphones were pressed against the steel mesh, voices shouting his name, demanding answers. He kept his chin high. But his silence was no longer control, it was defeat. Within hours the footage spread like fire. Clips of the raid hit every news channel. Agents storming Raven Manor, Amelia leading the breach, and most damning of all, Victor's drunken confession. His voice filling the airwaves as he admitted to Ethan Grant's murder. Anchors filling the faux untouchable murder. Newspapers splashed his face across their front page, branding him the king in chains. Stock tickers bled red as Halloween Global crumbled overnight. Board members scrambled, investors fled. The name once synonymous with power now rotted under the weight of scandal. Amelia sat in the back of a bureau transport, helmet resting on her knees. Exhaustion hit her in waves, but she didn't close her eyes. She watched the screens in the command van as broadcasts rolled one after another, in shocking admission of guilt connections to multiple disappearances. Justice at last for families silenced for the first time in years. She felt Ethan's ghost ease. His death had not been buried in shadows. The truth was out, undeniable. Sophia slid into the seat across from her, her voice low but steady. "He'll never see the outside again. Conspiracy, murder, obstruction, you name it. He's finished." Amelia nodded, resting a hand on Shadow's neck. "Good. Let the world see what happens when power thinks it's untouchable." Outside, dawn began to break through the storm, faint gold piercing the gray. It was imperfect, fragile, but it was light. Victor Holloway had built an empire on fear. Tonight, it was held together by nothing more than chains, and Amelia Grant finally let herself breathe. The antiseptic scent of the hospital was sharp, almost sterile enough to erase the chaos of Raven Peak. Machines beeped steadily in the dim recovery room, their rhythm proof that Daniel Carter was still alive. He lay pale against the sheets, chest bandaged tight, tubes and wires snaking from his arms. Each rise of his breathing was slow, careful, but it was their life refusing to give up. Sophia sat at his bedside, her fingers wrapped around his hand. For the first time since the mission began, her eyes softened. She had watched men fall before, partners vanish into the fog of violence, but seeing Daniel fight his way back left a weight pressing against her chest. "You stubborn bastard," she whispered, brushing his knuckles with her thumb. "You weren't allowed to check out early." His eyelids fluttered. When he finally opened them, the pain was obvious, but so was the spark. "Guess I missed the funeral," he muttered, voice raw from the breathing tube. Sophia almost laughed, tears breaking through instead. "Yet you're not getting rid of us that easy." The door creaked, and Amelia stepped inside. Her uniform was gone, replaced with a simple jacket and boots, but the weight of the past days clung to her posture. Shadow padded in at her side, head low but eyes sharp, as though guarding the room itself. Daniel turned his head, slow but deliberate. "You made it." Amelia managed a tired smile. "We all did. Victor's in chains. The whole world knows what he did to Ethan. To everyone, it's over." For a long moment, silence filled the room, heavy but not hopeless. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered. Daniel cleared his throat, wincing. "Then it was worth it. Every step, every scar." Amelia pulled a chair closer, lowering herself beside the bed. "Don't talk like you're finished. We still need you breathing. Justice doesn't end with one man in cuffs. It's carried by the people who live to remember why it matters." Sophia squeezed his hand tighter. "She's right. And you're not done yet." Daniel's eyes softened, the lines of strain easing just a little. "Maybe. But if I had to fall to bring the truth into the light, I'd do it again." Shadow nudged against Amelia's knee, tail brushing the floor. She reached down, fingers sinking into his fur, grounding herself. "Then you won't have to. We'll carry it together. The three of us." The monitors hummed, steady and alive. Outside the window, dawn bled across the skyline, a softer light than the one on Raven Peak, but stronger for it. For the first time in what felt like years, the future didn't seem unreachable. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was theirs. Daniel closed his eyes, not in defeat but in rest, the kind a survivor earns. And in that quiet hospital room, the war felt truly over. The city skyline glowed with the warmth of late afternoon, its glass towers catching the sun in a way that made them seem less like monuments to power and more like symbols of possibility. Inside one of those towers, a press conference gathered. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, and the air carried that restless energy of something about to begin. At the podium stood Amelia Grant. Her posture was steady, her voice strong, though her eyes carried the weight of everything she had lost. She glanced briefly at the photo displayed on the screen behind her, a smiling man in his 30s, Ethan Grant, forever frozen in the moments before greed and violence had stolen him away. "Today isn't about reopening old wounds," Amelia began, her voice carrying through the room. "It's about making sure no one else has to suffer them." She took a breath, grounding herself. "That Ethan Grant Foundation will provide legal support, protection, and financial aid for whistleblowers and families victimized by corporate corruption. My husband believed in truth. He believed in courage. And though his life was cut short, his belief lives on through this mission." A ripple of applause followed. Some reporters scribbled notes. Others raised their cameras, but all eyes stayed on her. At the front of the stage, sitting tall and calm, was Shadow. A sleek vest had been placed over his back, embroidered with the words, "Symbol of Loyalty." The dog's ears twitched as flashes went off, but he didn't move. He was exactly where he belonged, guarding, watching, reminding everyone that survival wasn't only about strength, but about devotion. Amelia reached down to rest a hand on his head. "And I can't stand here without acknowledging the one who saved me more times than I can count. Shadow has shown us all that loyalty can break through fear, and that courage doesn't need words. For that, this foundation also honors him not just as my companion, but as a symbol of what it means to stand unshaken in the face of darkness." The applause this time was louder, carrying a current of genuine emotion. Toward the back of the room, Sophia watched with folded arms, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Beside her sat Daniel, wheelchair-bound for the moment, but alive, healing, and carrying the quiet pride of seeing Amelia's fight transform into something bigger than revenge. "Ethan would be proud," Daniel murmured. Sophia nodded. "Yeah, and maybe, finally, the world's starting to listen." On stage, Amelia closed with words that echoed long after she stepped down. "This is not an ending, it's a beginning, one born from loss, but driven by hope." The cameras caught it all. The widow who turned pain into purpose, the partners who refused to break, and the dog whose loyalty had become legend. Outside the tower, the city carried on, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like the tide had shifted toward justice, toward light. The morning air in Silver Creek carried that crisp, clean bite only the forest could hold. Sunlight slipped through tall pines, casting long stripes of gold across the frost-tipped ground. Amelia walked the familiar trail with Shadow at her side, their steps falling into a rhythm that felt both grounding and new. For the first time in years, her chest didn't feel weighed down. The ache of Ethan's absence was still there, but softer now, woven into something steadier, something she could carry without breaking. Shadow trotted a few steps ahead, nose low to the ground, tail swaying with an easy confidence. Every so often he glanced back, checking on her, as if to remind her that even when paths grew dark, she was never truly alone. Amelia slowed near the clearing where the trees opened wide and the creek shimmered in the distance. She stopped, closing her eyes for a moment. The forest, once filled with silence that felt like loss, now breathed differently, alive with birdsong, the trickle of water, the faint rustle of branches high above. She let herself think of Ethan, his laugh, his stubborn sense of justice, the way he used to reach for her hand even when he was distracted. For years, those memories cut like glass. Now, they warmed her, wrapping around her like the sunlight pushing through the cold. You'd laugh at me for talking to the Crees, she whispered under her breath. But maybe you'd understand. Shadow nudged her hand with his nose, pulling her back into the moment. Amelia smiled and scratched behind his ears. The world had changed Victor Holloway in chains. The Ethan Grant Foundation already sparking hope across the country, and Daniel recovering with Sophia at his side, but standing there in the forest. Amelia realized a deeper truth. None of it would ever erase the losses. Justice never gave back what was taken. What it did, though, was transform pain into something that could outlive it, something stronger. She looked out toward the creek, light glittering on the water like 1,000 tiny promises. We made it, Ethan. Maybe not the way we wanted, but we made it. Shadow barked once, sharp and full, then sat at her feet as though sealing the words. Amelia breathed deep, letting the cool air fill her lungs, then started walking again, each step lighter than the last. The path ahead was uncertain, life always was, but it no longer felt like something to fear. With Shadow beside her, with Ethan's name carried forward through the Foundation, with allies who had become family, she knew the fight wasn't just survival anymore, it was purpose. The forest stretched before her, bright with morning, and for the first time, Amelia felt the light wasn't behind her, but waiting just ahead.